My name is Maya Chen, and I'm 32 years old. My brother thought 4 lawyers and a fake birthday dinner would be enough to force me to sign away control of my finances. He was wrong, because I brought someone he feared more than anyone else in this world. If you've ever been treated like a family ATM, hit subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. I promise by the final minute, you'll see what real justice looks like. Let me take you back to where this all started. I was 15 when Mom died from breast cancer. Dad remarried 2 years later to Linda, a nice enough woman who tried her best but never quite understood the dynamic between me and my older brother Ethan. He was 34 now, 2 years older than me, and for as long as I could remember, I'd been the one cleaning up his messes. I became a software engineer at a tech company in Seattle, grinding through community college while working retail, then transferring to University of Washington. Every dollar I made went toward tuition, rent, and apparently, my brother's problems. When I was 22 and finally landed my first real job, Ethan came to me with his eyes bright and his pitch polished. He needed $15,000 to launch a startup. A revolutionary app, he said. It would change everything. I gave him the money. He never paid me back. The app never launched. At 25, I got an incredible job offer in California. Better pay, better opportunities, better everything. But Dad's health started declining, minor heart issues that needed monitoring, and Ethan lived 3 hours away in Spokane, building his next big thing. So I stayed in Seattle. I told myself it was the right choice. That family came first. When I was 28, Dad needed a minor surgery that insurance didn't fully cover. The bill came to $10,000. Ethan was between jobs again, something about a failed consulting gig and bad timing. I covered 60% of it. Dad squeezed my hand in the hospital and said I was his rock. Ethan sent a text that said thanks with a thumbs-up emoji. 2 years ago, when I was 30, I'd saved enough for a 3-week trip through Europe. I'd planned every detail, booked flights, mapped out hostels and museums and cafes. Then Ethan called, his voice tight with panic. He'd maxed out his credit cards, $8,000 in debt, and the collectors were calling. Could I help just this once? I canceled my trip. I helped. He promised to pay me back within 6 months. That was 2 years ago. But here's the thing. Nobody understood about me. I wasn't weak. I wasn't a doormat. I was someone who believed in family, who thought that love meant sacrifice, who kept a detailed spreadsheet of every dollar I'd ever loaned because some part of me knew I'd need it someday. I just didn't know how soon that day would come. Ethan was the golden child, always had been. Even before Mom died, he could do no wrong in Dad's eyes. Ethan was charming, quick with a joke, the kind of guy who walked into a room and made everyone feel like they were part of something special. His failures weren't failures, they were learning experiences. His debts weren't irresponsibility, they were investments in his future. Me? I was steady, reliable. The daughter who showed up, paid bills, and asked for nothing in return. I think that's why nobody noticed when I started pulling away emotionally. They were too busy watching Ethan's next performance. Everything changed 8 months ago when Ethan met Sarah Whitmore at a networking event in Seattle. Sarah came from money, old family money from a chain of car dealerships across Washington state. She was beautiful, poised, and exactly the kind of woman who looked good on Ethan's arm. Within 3 months, they were engaged. Suddenly, Ethan was different around me. When he introduced me to Sarah's friends at a dinner party, he said, "This is my little sister Maya. She works in IT." The way he said it, like my job was something small, something to brush past quickly before moving on to more interesting topics. I'm a senior software engineer at a respected company, but he made it sound like I fixed printers in a basement. Sarah asked me to be part of the wedding party, a bridesmaid alongside her college sorority sisters and childhood friends. When we went dress shopping, she picked a sage green color that made my skin look sallow. Her other bridesmaids looked radiant in it. I looked sick. Sarah smiled sweetly and said it was important everyone matched. At family dinners, Ethan started policing what I talked about. When I mentioned a successful project at work, he'd change the subject. When Sarah's parents asked about my life, Ethan would jump in with something about how I was figuring things out, even though I'd been consistently employed for a decade. Once, Linda pulled me aside and whispered that Ethan had asked her not to mention any of the times he'd borrowed money from me. It wouldn't look good to Sarah's family, he'd said. I started to see it clearly then. I wasn't his sister anymore. I was a liability, evidence of a past he wanted to erase. 3 months before the wedding, Ethan called me on a Tuesday evening. I was making dinner, my phone on speaker while I chopped vegetables. His voice had that careful, rehearsed quality that meant he'd practiced this conversation. "Hey, Maya, so I wanted to talk to you about something. Sarah's family is being incredibly generous. They're covering the venue and catering, but we still need help with a few things. The photographer we want is $12,000, and we're hoping to do a honeymoon in Bali, which is another $15,000. I know it sounds like a lot, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, you know?" The knife in my hand stopped moving. $27,000. He wanted $27,000. "Ethan," I said slowly, "I can't do that." "Come on, Maya. Family helps family. You've got a good job. You're not supporting anyone. What else are you spending money on?" My first thought was of the down payment I'd been saving for a condo. My second thought was of the retirement account I contributed to every month because I didn't want to be a burden on anyone when I was older. My third thought was a flash of rage, so pure it surprised me. "I've helped you plenty," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm happy to attend your wedding and celebrate with you, but I can't contribute financially this time." There was a long pause. "Seriously, this is my wedding, Maya." "I know, and I'm sure it will be beautiful with what you and Sarah's family are already planning." "Fine," he said, his voice cold. "I guess I know where I stand with you." He hung up. I stood in my kitchen, vegetables half chopped, and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't guilt. It was clarity. The next day, Dad called, then Linda, then Sarah's mom somehow, asking if there was a misunderstanding about family contributions. I realized Ethan had mobilized everyone, turned my refusal into a family crisis. In the family group chat, messages piled up about unity and supporting each other and not letting money come between loved ones. Nobody mentioned the $35,000 I'd already given him over the years. Nobody asked if I'd ever been paid back. I sent one email to Ethan. I kept it professional, the same tone I used with difficult coworkers. I told him I loved him and wanted him to be happy, but I couldn't continue to support him financially. I'd already loaned him too much that had never been repaid. I would attend his wedding as his sister, and that would be my gift. Ethan's response came 2 days later. He called me selfish, ungrateful, said I was jealous because I was still single and stuck in the same job while he was building a real life. He removed me from the wedding party, demoted me to regular guest. When I showed up for the next family dinner, Linda hugged me a little too tight and Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. Within a week, the narrative had solidified. Maya was the problem. Maya was bitter. Maya couldn't be happy for her brother's success. Nobody asked for my side. Nobody wanted to hear it. 2 weeks after I sent that email, Dad's blood pressure spiked. Nothing serious, but enough for a doctor's visit and new medication. Ethan sent me a text that said, "Hope you're happy." The stress from all this made Dad sick. I stopped going to family dinners. I stopped responding to the group chat. I focused on work, spent time with friends who didn't treat me like an ATM, and started seeing a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. She asked me one question that changed everything. "Why do you think you're responsible for managing everyone else's emotions and finances?" I didn't have a good answer. I still don't. 1 week before the wedding, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. It was different from his previous messages, softer, almost vulnerable. "Maya, I'm sorry I've been harsh. I know I haven't always been the best brother. I want to reconcile before the wedding. Can we have dinner? Just family, nothing fancy. Your birthday is Friday. Let's celebrate that. Please. I miss my sister." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me had been waiting for this apology for months, years maybe. I showed the text to my therapist during our session. "What does your gut tell you?" she asked. "That something's off," I admitted. "But I also really want to believe my brother wants to fix this." She nodded. "Just remember, you're allowed to protect yourself even from people you love." Dad called that afternoon, his voice warm. "Ethan told me about the birthday dinner. I'm so glad you two are working things out, sweetheart. It's been hard seeing you both at odds. I agreed to go, but I also noticed the strange specifics. Ethan insisted on a particular Italian restaurant we'd been to before. Not special, but nice enough. He booked a private room, which seemed excessive for a family dinner. He emphasized timing, told me to arrive at exactly 7 p.m., not to be late. I mentioned it to my best friend Nora, who I'd known since college. She listened to my concerns and said, "Just keep your phone on you, and text me by 9 if everything's okay. If I don't hear from you, I'm calling." Friday arrived. I dressed nicely but not formally, dark jeans and a silk blouse, my hair down. I wanted to look put together but not like I was trying too hard. As I drove to the restaurant, I felt my stomach tighten. That instinct, the one that had saved me in bad relationships and sketchy situations, was screaming that something was wrong. But I also felt hope. Maybe Ethan really did want to fix things. Maybe this could be a new beginning. I parked and walked into the restaurant at 6:58. The hostess smiled and led me to the private room at the back. I could hear voices inside, more than I expected. My hand hesitated on the door handle. Then I opened it. The room fell silent. Ethan sat at the head of the table, Dad and Linda on one side. But there were no birthday decorations, no cake, no presents. Instead, seated along the other side of the table were 4 people I'd never seen before, 3 men and 1 woman, all in expensive suits with briefcases open in front of them. My stomach dropped. "Maya," Ethan said, his voice stripped of any warmth. "Come in and sit down. We need to talk." I stayed in the doorway, my purse clutched tight. "Oh, what's going on?" One of the men in suits gestured to an empty chair. "Ms. Chen, I'm Robert Morrison, attorney at law. Please, have a seat. This won't take long." My throat felt tight. I looked at Dad, but he was staring at the table. Linda's expression was uncomfortable but unsurprised. This had been planned. They all knew. "These are my attorneys," Ethan said, and his voice had a hardness I'd never heard before. "We've prepared a power of attorney document. You're going to sign it." He slid a thick stack of papers across the table toward the empty chair. "A power of attorney?" I repeated, still standing. "For what?" The female attorney spoke up, her tone professional and detached. "It's a simple estate and financial planning document, Ms. Chen. Given your father's health concerns and your family's need for unified financial management, this grants your brother limited power of attorney to manage certain shared family assets and obligations." I stepped closer and picked up the document. My hands shook as I flipped through it. My vision blurred with adrenaline, but certain phrases jumped out. 50% of my assets, family contribution fund, $50,000 from my savings account, 5-year term. "You want me to give you control of half my money," I said slowly, looking up at Ethan, "and put $50,000 into a family fund that you manage." "It's for Dad's care," Ethan said quickly. "His medical expenses could get worse. This way, we're both contributing fairly." "I've already contributed more than fairly," I said, my voice rising. "I've given you $78,000 over the last 10 years. The attorneys exchanged glances. Ethan's jaw tightened. "That was loans between siblings," he said. "This is different. This is about family responsibility." "And if I don't sign?" The lead attorney, Morrison, leaned forward. His expression was practiced sympathy hiding steel. "Ms. Chen, your brother has evidence of financial elder abuse. By refusing to contribute to your father's care while maintaining a substantial income, you're potentially liable for civil action. If this goes to court, it will be expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally damaging for your entire family. Your father's health cannot take that kind of stress." Emotional blackmail wrapped in legal threats. I looked at Dad again. This time, he met my eyes, and I saw guilt there, but he said nothing. He was going to let this happen. "If you don't sign this," Ethan said, his voice low and mean, "I'll sue you. Dad's health can't take more stress from you." The room felt airless. My birthday. They'd used my birthday as bait. Every instinct I had screamed to run, to walk out and never look back. But another part of me, the part that had been trained since childhood to prioritize family peace over my own well-being, almost reached for the pen Morrison was offering. Then I remembered something my therapist had said. You don't have to make decisions under pressure. You're allowed to say you need time. I set the papers down carefully. I straightened my spine. I looked at Ethan, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing my brother's face. And something inside me, something that had been bending and bending for years, finally snapped. I smiled. It felt strange on my face, calm and cold and completely foreign. Of course, I said softly. But first, let me introduce someone you should meet. Ethan frowned, confused. The attorneys shifted uncomfortably. I pulled out my phone, my thumb steady as I scrolled to a contact I'd hoped I wouldn't need to call. He's been waiting outside, I said, pressing the call button and lifting the phone to my ear. He'll want to see these documents too. One ring, two. Then a familiar voice answered, warm and concerned. Maya, is it time? Yes, I said, watching Ethan's expression shift from confusion to the first flicker of concern. Please come in now, David. I hung up and met my brother's eyes. Who's David? He asked, and I heard the edge of worry in his voice. The door behind me opened. I stepped aside, and David Harrison walked into the room. The effect was instantaneous. Ethan's face went from confused to pale in seconds. His mouth opened, closed. He stood up so fast his chair scraped backward. Mr. Harrison? He stammered. What are you doing here? David Harrison was in his mid-40s, silver threading through his dark hair, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. He had the kind of presence that came from years of commanding courtrooms and boardrooms, the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. He nodded politely to the room, his eyes taking in the four attorneys, the documents spread on the table, my father's uncomfortable posture, Linda's frozen expression. Then he looked at me. Maya, are you all right? I am now, I said. Ethan found his voice, though it came out higher than usual. Mr. Harrison, I don't understand. Why are you here? This is a private family matter. David's expression remained pleasant, but something sharp flickered behind his eyes. Is it? Because from what Maya described on the phone, this looks like coercion, and Ms. Chen is a close personal friend of mine. When she told me about this dinner, I felt I should be present. The lead attorney, Morrison, cleared his throat. Mr. Harrison, I'm familiar with your firm's reputation. I assure you this is a straightforward estate planning document. There's no coercion involved. Then you won't mind if I review it, David said. It wasn't a question. He walked to the table, picked up the power of attorney documents, and began reading. The room was silent except for the rustle of pages. I stayed near the door, watching Ethan's face cycle through emotions, confusion, fear, calculation, and finally a desperate kind of anger. I don't understand, Ethan said, looking between David and me. How do you two even know each other? This was the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. The moment to tell a story I'd kept quiet for years because I'd never wanted to make anyone feel small. But Ethan had forfeited that consideration when he walked 4 lawyers into my fake birthday dinner. We met 8 years ago, I said. I was 24, working full-time and trying to afford night classes in coding. David was teaching a weekend workshop at a community center in Fremont. He was building a legal tech startup and needed someone who understood both technology and law. David glanced up from the documents, a small smile on his face. Maya was the only person in that workshop who asked intelligent questions. Everyone else wanted to know about salaries and job placement. She wanted to know about the problems we were trying to solve. I volunteered to help, I continued. 6 months, unpaid. I was broke, living in a studio apartment with 2 roommates, eating ramen most nights. But David was teaching me real-world development, and that was worth more than money at the time. I watched the memory play across David's face. She built our MVP, he said, still reading the documents but clearly listening. The minimum viable product that let us pitch to investors. We raised $2.3 million in Series A funding based on what Maya created in my spare bedroom that doubled as an office. One of the younger attorneys shifted in his seat. Even they seemed to recognize the significance of that number. David offered me equity, I said. 10% of the company. I was 24 years old, and he was offering me what could have become serious money. I turned it down. Why? Linda asked, speaking for the first time. She sounded genuinely curious. Because I told him I just wanted to learn, I said. He'd given me that. It felt like enough. David set down the documents and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I've never forgotten that. Most people would have taken the equity. But Maya said she didn't want to feel like she was owed something, that she'd rather earn her own success. She was 24 years old and had more integrity than most people I've met in 40 years. Ethan's face had gone from pale to flushed. That's a nice story, but it doesn't change anything. This is still a family matter. Is it? David picked up the documents again, his tone shifting to something colder. Because I've been reading this power of attorney, and I have concerns. Significant concerns. He looked at the 4 attorneys. Did your client fully disclose his financial history to you? Did he mention that he's borrowed approximately $78,000 from his sister over the past decade? Did he tell you about the pattern of loans that were never repaid? Morrison frowned. That's not relevant to this estate planning document. It's extremely relevant when you're threatening a lawsuit for financial elder abuse, David said, his voice sharp now, because I have documentation that tells a very different story. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. I recognized it immediately. 2 weeks ago, when David had called me after overhearing Ethan bragging about how his sister would definitely fund his wedding, I'd told him everything. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I'd finally said the truth out loud to someone who listened. David had asked if I kept records. I'd sent him my spreadsheet. This is a detailed accounting of every financial transaction between Maya and Ethan over the last 10 years, David said, spreading papers across the table. Dates, amounts, text message confirmations of repayment promises that were never fulfilled. There are emails here where Ethan explicitly calls these amounts loans and promises to pay them back with interest. Dad leaned forward, looking at the papers. I saw his expression change as he recognized screenshots of text messages, bank transfer records, emails with Ethan's signature. David wasn't finished. There's also an interesting email thread from 3 years ago where Ethan asked Maya to lie to a bank about her income so she could co-sign a personal loan for him. That's bank fraud, Mr. Chen. A federal crime. Ethan stood up. That's taken out of context. Maya knew what I meant. Did she? David's voice was ice. Because her response email explicitly says, I won't lie on a legal document, but I can loan you $5,000 from my savings, which you accepted, which you never repaid. The female attorney closed her briefcase. Mr. Morrison, I think we need to have a conversation with our client privately. I agree, Morrison said, and I could hear the anger in his voice. An attorney hates being blindsided by their own client almost as much as they hate being blindsided by opposing counsel. Wait, Ethan said desperately. This is all just misunderstandings. Maya, come on, you know I always intended to pay you back. We're family. This is what family does. I'd been quiet, letting David do the heavy lifting, but now I stepped forward and everyone turned to look at me. No, Ethan, I said, this is what I did. I sacrificed. I gave up opportunities. I stayed small so you could feel big, and you took and never once said thank you. You said I owed you because we're family. But what did you ever give me except debt and disappointment? Dad finally spoke. Maya, is all of this true? The $78,000? You can see the records yourself, I said. It's all documented. Every loan Ethan asked for. Every promise to pay me back. Every time I canceled my own plans to bail him out. I didn't know, Dad said softly. Why didn't you tell me? Because every time I tried, you said Ethan was going through a hard time. You said family helps family. You said I was doing well enough that I could afford to help. My voice cracked. When was it going to be my turn to go through a hard time? When was anyone going to help me? Linda put her hand on Dad's arm. Her eyes were wet. I'm so sorry, Maya. I didn't realize the extent of it. David's voice cut through the emotion. Here's what's going to happen. These 4 attorneys are going to pack up their documents and leave. Maya is not signing anything. And if your client proceeds with any lawsuit claiming financial elder abuse, I will personally represent Ms. Chen. We will countersue for fraud, financial exploitation, and defamation. Discovery will be extensive and public." He turned to Ethan, and his voice dropped to something dangerous. "Oh, and about that funding you wanted for your startup? The one you pitched to me 2 weeks ago at the Columbia Tower networking event? The revolutionary project management platform that you said would disrupt the industry?" Ethan's face went gray. "Denied. My firm doesn't invest in people who exploit their families. And I'll be sure to mention why to the other investors in our network. The startup community in Seattle is smaller than you think." One by one, the attorneys stood. Morrison handed Ethan a business card. "Call our office Monday. We need to discuss proper disclosure requirements and whether this representation is viable." They filed out without another word. The door closed behind them, and suddenly the private dining room felt massive and empty. Ethan slumped back into his chair. "You just destroyed my funding opportunity. Do you know how long I've been working on that pitch? How many months of development?" "I know exactly how long," David said, "because you used code snippets from a platform Maya consulted on 2 years ago. I recognized the architecture in your demo. Did you ask her permission?" The silence was answer enough. I felt something break loose in my chest, something that had been wound tight for years. "I'm done, Ethan. I'm done being your backup plan. I'm done being the safety net you never appreciate until you're falling." "Maya, please," Dad said. "Don't let this destroy our family." "I'm not destroying anything," I said. "I'm just refusing to keep building on a broken foundation. You want family? Then be my family. But I won't be anyone's ATM anymore." I looked at David. "Thank you for everything." "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You did this yourself. I just showed up." I walked out of that restaurant with David beside me, leaving my father and brother in the ruins of a birthday dinner that was never meant to celebrate me at all. In the parking lot, David handed me his business card, though I already had his number. "I meant what I said in there. If he tries anything, call me. I'll handle it pro bono if I have to." "He won't," I said. "Ethan only fights battles he thinks he can win, and he knows he can't win this one." David hesitated. "Are you going to be okay?" I thought about it, really thought about it. Then I smiled, and it felt real this time. "Yeah, I think I finally will be." 3 days later was Ethan's wedding. I didn't go. I sent a polite text citing a scheduling conflict and wished him well. The truth was, I spent that Saturday hiking in the Cascades with Nora, my phone off, breathing air that felt cleaner than it had in years. But I heard about it anyway. Small towns, even cities like Seattle, have ecosystems of gossip, especially among families with money and connections. Sarah's parents had done some investigating after the lawyer dinner story reached them through Linda, who'd apparently needed to talk to someone. They'd hired a private investigator, standard practice for families protecting trust funds and inheritances. What they found wasn't pretty. Ethan had $45,000 in credit card debt he'd never disclosed. He'd been using joint wedding accounts, the ones Sarah's parents had set up for vendor deposits, to pay down his personal credit cards. $17,000 meant for the photographer, flowers, and DJ had disappeared into Visa and MasterCard payments. Sarah's mother confronted Ethan 2 days before the wedding. According to Linda, who called me crying, it had been brutal. Accusations of fraud, threats of legal action. Ethan had sworn it was a misunderstanding, that he'd planned to pay it all back after the wedding when some mysterious business deal came through. But the wedding went forward. Too much money spent, too many guests confirmed. Sarah walked down the aisle in her $15,000 dress, and Ethan waited at the altar in his rented tux, and everyone smiled for photos. But the people who knew, knew. The reception was tense. Conversations were careful. Dad sat at his table looking older than I'd ever seen him. 2 weeks after the wedding, Sarah filed for annulment. The grounds were fraud regarding financial status. Ethan had claimed to be solvent, had signed prenuptial documents stating he had no significant debts. The credit card situation and the diverted wedding funds were enough. In Washington state, you can get an annulment within 90 days if you can prove fraud or concealment of material facts. Sarah's family had excellent lawyers, better than the four Ethan had brought to my birthday ambush. 1 month after the wedding that wasn't really a wedding anymore, Dad called me. We hadn't spoken since that night at the restaurant. His voice on the phone sounded tired. "Can we meet for coffee? Just you and me?" I almost said no, but something in his tone made me agree. We met at a Starbucks near his house, neutral ground. He looked smaller than I remembered, his hair grayer, his shoulders stooped in a way that made my chest ache. "I'm sorry," he said before I even sat down. "I failed you. As a father, I failed you." I stirred sugar into my coffee that I didn't really want. "You believed him. You always believed him." "I wanted to," Dad said. "Ethan reminded me of myself when I was young. All confidence and big dreams. You were always so capable, so independent. I thought you didn't need me the way he did." "I needed you," I said quietly. "I needed someone to see what I was sacrificing. I needed someone to tell me it was okay to say no." Dad's hands shook around his cup. "I found something after that dinner. I was looking for insurance papers in Ethan's old room, the one he stayed in before the wedding. I found a credit card application from 3 years ago. It had my signature on it. I never signed it. The implications hung between us." "He forged your signature?" Dad nodded. I confronted him. He said he'd been desperate, that I would have helped him if I'd known how bad it was. He said it like that made it okay. "What did you do?" I told him he needed to leave. He's been staying with a friend in Tacoma. I couldn't have him in my house anymore, not after everything I learned. We sat in silence for a while. Around us, people ordered lattes and worked on laptops and lived their normal lives. I envied them. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Dad said. "I don't even know if I deserve it, but I want you to know that I see you now. Everything you gave up, everything you did. I see it, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I looked at my father, really looked at him, and saw regret etched into every line of his face. He wasn't lying. He really hadn't known, but that didn't erase the years of being invisible, of being taken for granted. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," I said honestly, "but I'm willing to try, with boundaries, real boundaries this time." Dad nodded, wiping his eyes. "Whatever you need, whatever time you need." Linda reached out too, a long email apologizing for not standing up for me, for prioritizing family peace over family justice. She said she'd spent her whole marriage trying to be a good stepmother, which meant not rocking the boat, not questioning Dad's decisions. She realized now that silence had been its own form of harm. I wrote back, not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. An opening for something different in the future. Ethan, though. Ethan tried everything. First came the texts, dozens of them. Apologies that felt copy-pasted, promises that rang hollow, accusations when I didn't respond. He cycled through every manipulation tactic he'd ever used. Guilt, anger, bargaining, playing the victim. "Maya, please. I made mistakes, but I'm still your brother. You've ruined my life. I hope you're happy. I'll pay you back everything, I swear. Just give me another chance. Sarah's family is destroying me in the annulment. I need character witnesses. Please." I blocked his number, then his email, then his social media accounts. Each block felt like removing weight from my shoulders. He showed up at my apartment once. I didn't answer the door. He sat in his car outside for an hour before leaving. I'd already filed a formal complaint with my building's security. He didn't come back. 6 months after the birthday dinner, I got a promotion, senior software engineer to engineering manager, a role I'd been working toward for 3 years. The salary increase was substantial, $40,000 more a year. The first thing I did was put a down payment on a condo. Nothing extravagant, but mine. A 1-bedroom in Capitol Hill with big windows and a view of the Space Needle. I moved in on a Saturday with Nora and a handful of friends who'd become my chosen family. The second thing I did was start therapy. Real therapy, twice a week initially, working through patterns I'd learned in childhood. Why I equated love with sacrifice. Why I'd made myself small. Why I'd believed my worth was tied to my usefulness. My therapist, Dr. Patel, asked hard questions. What would it look like to prioritize yourself? Not selfishly, but healthily? I didn't know at first. I'd spent so long being the person everyone else needed that I'd forgotten how to be the person I needed. But I learned. Slowly, incrementally, I learned. I said no to things I didn't want to do. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I invested in myself. Nice furniture, art classes, a gym membership, travel. That trip to Europe I'd canceled, I rebooked it. 2 weeks in Italy eating pasta and drinking wine and sending postcards to no one but myself. David became a friend, a real one. We met for coffee monthly, talking about tech and law and the strange intersection where both lived. He introduced me to his network, and I started consulting for legal tech startups, advisory work that paid well and challenged me. One of those startups asked me to speak at a conference. Building Boundaries, while Maintaining Compassion was my talk title. I was terrified. Public speaking had never been my strength, but I stood on that stage in front of 200 people and told a version of my story. Not the details, not the specifics, but the shape of it. What it's like to be the reliable one. What it costs to be everyone's solution. How to know when helping becomes harmful. After the talk, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 25, tears in her eyes. "My brother keeps asking me for money," she said. "He's asked for $15,000 in the last year. I finally said no last week, and my whole family is mad at me. I thought I was a bad person until I heard you talk. Thank you for making me feel less alone." I gave her my email address. We exchanged messages over the following weeks. I shared my therapist's contact info, book recommendations, the framework I'd used to set boundaries. She sent me updates. She'd opened a separate savings account her family couldn't access. She'd started saying no without apologizing. Her brother was angry, but she was okay. I realized something then. My pain had purpose. Not the pain itself that had been real and damaging and unnecessary, but what I'd learned from it, that could help others. That could mean something. 1 year after the birthday dinner that wasn't, it was my actual birthday. 33 years old. I threw a party at my new condo. Nora came and friends from work, and David with his wife, who I'd finally met. No family, just people who'd chosen to be there. Dad texted that morning. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I'm proud of you." "Love, Dad," I texted back. "Thank you. Love you too." Linda sent flowers with a card that said, "Wishing you every happiness you deserve." Ethan sent nothing. I didn't expect him to. According to Dad, he was working a sales job in Spokane, living in a studio apartment, slowly paying down his debts. He'd asked about me once, whether I'd consider talking to him. Dad said I'd declined. He didn't ask again. At my party, with music playing and people laughing, Nora pulled me aside. "You seem different," she said. Lighter. "I feel different," I said. "I feel like me again. Or maybe like me for the first time." That night, after everyone left, I sat on my balcony looking at the city lights. I thought about the girl I'd been, the woman I'd become. I thought about sacrifice and love and the difference between the two. I didn't hate Ethan. That surprised me. I'd expected rage to last longer, to burrow deeper, but somewhere along the way, I'd let it go. Not because he deserved forgiveness, but because carrying anger was exhausting, and I was tired of being tired. I didn't need him to apologize anymore. I didn't need him to pay me back, though legally he still owed me. I didn't need him to acknowledge what he'd done. His recognition wasn't required for my healing. What I needed was exactly what I had: freedom. The freedom to build a life on my terms. The freedom to say no without guilt. The freedom to be imperfect and whole and finally enough. My phone buzzed. A LinkedIn message from someone I didn't know, a woman in Chicago. "I heard your talk at the conference online. My family situation is similar to what you described. Do you have any advice?" I smiled and started typing, because this, I'd learned, was how pain transformed. Not by erasing it, but by using it to light the way for someone else still in the dark. "You're not alone," I wrote, "and you're not selfish for protecting yourself. Let me share what helped me." Outside my window, Seattle glowed. Inside my home, I was finally at peace. And that, more than any apology or repayment or family reconciliation, was the justice I'd been searching for all along.